principles. Don't get engaged in the semantics, don't get engaged with the logistics of the opening opposition. You're trying to start the debate as a whole. If your debate on the opening half consists of them complaining about your model and you complaining about their model and arguing over the number of people that are going to stop smoking, by the time the debate gets to the closing, they will move on from that and you will have contributed nothing to the debate. The closing teams will get first and second. You will hope for a third or a fourth. Attack the principles of the opposition side. It ensures that you start the clash that's going to be carried out throughout the rest of the round. If you attack the biggest themes of the opposition side, then the closing teams will still be arguing on those same themes, they'll still be arguing on those same principles, you're not going to be outdone. And then last is the idea of pre-buttal. This goes along, this has to do with the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister both. A lot of times what you hear in a Prime Minister's speech is, the opposition side could say this, and so I'm going to rebut it before they actually say it. This is not a good strategy, because two things are going to happen. Either A, you tell them what they are going to say, and it's a really good argument, and they hadn't thought of it, and you just gave it to them. B, they're going to think of a response of how you rebutted it, so that you're going to give them a chance to think about your response before they make their argument, so they can fix their argument. Or C, if it really was a bad argument and you really did rebut it, they just won't say it, and you wasted 2 minutes of your speech rebutting something that's never going to come up. What's better to do is to give the pre-buttal to the Deputy Prime Minister. And this is why it's under the Deputy section of my presentation. Because what you want to do is, if you know the response for an argument that is likely to come up, wait for them to make that argument, allow for them to make that argument, you already have the response prepared, it makes you look really smart, like you set them up to say something dumb, and then you tore them down afterwards. So this concept of pre-buttal, you want to leave these types of arguments for your deputy to take out the opening opposition, you put them one step behind the debate, and at the very least you're going to probably be winning the opening half of the debate. Alright, we're almost there. POIs. There's two halves of POIs. You can take POIs, you can offer POIs. First of all, taking points of information. I think this is important on the opening government. You want to take a point of information early, after the minute mark, from the opening opposition. The reason for this is you're still setting up the debate at this point. If they want to offer you a point of information, and they ask for clarification, and they tell you something that you hadn't thought of, for example, if we have a suicide motion, and they say, well, does this mean that people that were 12 years old can commit suicide? You can say, if you had listened and waited, that was included, I'm not done with my setup yet, I was going to tell you what the age limit was, whether you were or not. So giving a point of information early on allows for you to preempt and allows for you to hear attacks on your model and allows for you to clarify it at the very beginning of the debate, as opposed to it coming up at the end of your speech where you really can't do anything about it. The next thing that we have is at the end of your speech, you also want to talk, if you're going to take a second point of information, I would also take it from the opening opposition again. I know it's not fair, but I have never heard a Prime Minister criticized for only taking points of information from one side. They have two speeches coming after you. They shouldn't complain. If they want to say something on the closing, they can do it in their speeches. The reason you take it from the opening opposition is you want to give your deputy a chance to hear what they're going to say. You want to give your Deputy Prime Minister a chance to preview the arguments coming out of the opening opposition and give them a chance to respond to it. So you want to get as much information from them as possible in the Prime Minister's speech so that your deputy has a chance to get started on what they're going to say. If you're the Deputy Prime Minister, Logan, I think, referred to this in his speaker roles presentation, then you can take a point of information from the closing team, again, to allow for some semblance of clash to start existing between the two teams. It's your only chance to respond to them is if they ask you a point of information in your speech. In terms of offering points of information, you want to offer as many as possible, without being obnoxious. Like if they sit you down, don't just bounce. Right? But give them a chance to finish their arguments, and then make sure that you're still standing up. Do not be dead. If you're an opening government team, if you're a Prime Minister and you do not stand up after your speech, despite the fact that everybody on the opposition side is telling you all the reasons why you're wrong, to the judge it makes it look like they're right. It makes it look like you agree with them, like, oh dang, yeah, I was wrong about that, that sucks. Right? You want to make sure that you give responses, you want to make sure you have responses, and more importantly, once you're taken, what do you say in a point of information? You want to use the point of information to remind the judges of what you said. Do not waste points of information rebutting tiny arguments from the closing team because they irk you, because their statistics are wrong, because you don't like the example that they brought up. That will never strategically benefit you as an opening government team. You always want to give your points of information to remind the judge, we said this, They haven't responded to this. We started this argument. Things like that that show that you did your job correctly and bring the debate back to the ground that you laid out. And questions? I had to use blue again because I ran out of colors. Ida did a really good job. Nobody has any questions? Any questions? Yeah. Do we have microphones, Sean? Or here you go. You have one? What's that? Is this one something with? I think there's one missing.
Thank you for your explanation about this. I have a question about the relationship between the Prime Minister and the Deputy. You just said that not, as a Deputy, you just shouldn't just repeat what the Prime Minister just said, but as a team, you should cooperate.
Right.
And you should know what he or she said, and then you can extend or develop. So my question is that is it better to discuss what you should do or I should do, or just listen to the Prime Minister and then you think about what you should extend?
Yeah, I think one in prep time, definitely the partners should be on the same page. You both should be coming into the debate knowing what each of you is supposed to say, but this goes for any position. As a second speaker, what you prepped isn't necessarily what your partner is going to say. A lot of times people will forget to make arguments that they thought they were going to make in prep time. A lot of times people will change the arguments during their speech for maybe they were asked a point of information, maybe they thought of something new. So as a second speaker, yes, you want to come into the debate on the same page, but also as a second speaker, you want to be listening to what your partner said while they were speaking, and if something changed or if they missed something, you want to recognize that and be able to back them up.
So I think flexible is very necessary.
Yeah, definitely, in every position.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for the speech. I have the question that is, should the opening government also elaborate how to enact the policy?
Right.
Because you just said that they need to take the hard line, saying that I try to argue holistically, but like banning smoking, and the opposition asked the question, how is it possible for you to ban smoking everywhere? And then, is it necessary, or should the government explain very specifically, or is it a strategy just to avoid that?
Can I answer that one?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
I don't mean to impose on Josh's lecture, but one of the things that I was talking with the debater the other day about, and that seemed to help, these debates, British parliamentary debates, are debates about what we should do, not so much debates about what we can do. And so sometimes, even if you can't ban smoking anywhere, the debate should be about whether or not we should try to ban smoking everywhere. And so I would encourage you strongly, just in general, not to think of the debates as whether or not we can do something successfully, although that certainly is a legitimate question. But these debates are much more concerned with, should we do these things? Is it the right thing to do? Those will make for much better debates than the can we debates.
Yeah, I think going along with that too, one thing that you might be able to do as a Prime Minister in the topic yesterday on ban smoking. Yes, you do want some semblance of a model. You might want to say, if they were to ban the importation and growing and sale of tobacco, it would make it a lot harder for people to smoke it because they couldn't get it. So you do want to include things like that, but I think you can almost concede as a Prime Minister also, going along with what Steve said. Just tell the people, tell the debate, look, we know we can't stop everybody from smoking. We don't care. We're going to try to stop as many people as possible from smoking because we think we should. And we don't think the opposition side in this debate should be arguing over how many, but we think they should be arguing over the principle. And I think if you say that as a prime minister, it makes the opposition look really bad if after that they get up and they start to, you can't do it, you can't do it. Because you just told them, we know that, right? We don't care.
Hello, Mr. Josh. Yeah, just now I mentioned that example about Los Angeles about 2004 or 2005. There were too many good players such as Kobe Bryant, Shaquille O'Neal, Gary Payton. So what I want to know is it enough or is it necessary to show your own ability in this team and how to balance it if had any?
Like from the basketball? For the debate or for the basketball?
Well, debaters.
Okay, no, I think you know the important thing there is to recognize that maybe an argument that might be stronger than another argument in a vacuum. If you don't have the contextualization of the debate going on around you, if you don't have the contextualization of your team line, even if that argument might be stronger without those things existing, once you put it in the debate, will it make more or less sense than a different argument? And this is, again, I think that the demonstration around yesterday is a good example of this. You know, making arguments that had to do with the quality of information, or making arguments that had to do with the capacity of a government to regulate, were not, even if you didn't know what the topic was, if you thought those arguments might be stronger than some of the arguments that dealt with the definition of the internet as a basic human right, under the context of the debate, they're weaker. So that's the idea there, is they need to be uniform, they need to be put together, and they need to have a clear line of approach. So even if they're stronger individually, they're not necessarily stronger because they don't combine together to really accomplish the direction that you should be going as a team. Does that make sense? Okay.
Hi, Josh. Nice lecture.
Thank you.
I appreciate you saying that the speech should have a premise. That's the interlinks of the whole speech. It means that your argument and your speech should have a theme. However, in some real situations, when we have 3 or 4 arguments, it really seems hard for us to have a theme in this whole speech. So I was wondering, can you tell us how exactly what we should do? Thank you.
Yeah, I think you're right. Definitely, there's some motions. You know, these what I'm putting out here are things you should try to accomplish in most motions. And like I was saying with the model, depending on the motion, certain things will or won't be done. So certain topics, I've outlined how to do a model, but also at the same time we said, you know, it's not necessary to have a model for every motion. And similarly with, you know, you trying to bring all of your arguments under one team line, if you have 3 arguments under that team line, and you can't think of a 4th argument that falls under the team line, I'm not saying you can't bring up other arguments that are strong. The idea is, if you can, you want them to be unified. That would be better. But if you can think of 4 strong arguments, you're still going to do really well as a team. You just aren't going to do as well as a team that has 4 strong arguments that all make the same line of approach. So strive for that, but if you can't get it, you know, if it can't happen, it can't happen.
Okay, good morning, Josh. My question is like this, because just now you say in the debate what we mostly argue against is what we should do, and this seems the distinction between value debate and policy debate is not so clear or not so obvious. So can you give us some more detailed information about the difference between debate upon value debate and policy debate?
I think the 2 examples that I think I listed was, one, say if we were trying to reform the United Nations Security Council. This is more clearly a policy debate where you would need a model, and a lot of the arguments you're going to be making are based on how things are going to work and how tangibly and logistically things are going to improve. But there's also philosophical arguments beyond that. There's also philosophical arguments behind that. Like if you were going to reform the United Nations Security Council by adding India, you might want to make equity-based arguments, saying the Security Council is biased right now. It only has these types of countries. It's not including a large region of the world. So representation is important. So there's no debate that's completely policy and no debate that's completely philosophical. You want to do your best to include both. But different motions are going to lean one way or the other. In that example, the plan I think would be important. Another example we talked about was salary caps for CEOs of corporations. The plan might be important. You might want to say what the cap is. You might want to say, what type of corporations. So that would be important. Other debates, or the ban smoking, you can have a model, but again, the model shouldn't be the focus of the debate. The model should be something that you put out there to show the debate is going to happen. You don't want it to be unclear. You don't want people to be thinking that it's never going to work. You don't want people to be thinking that there's huge holes in it. The goal of the model is to put up something so everybody knows how it's going to work, everybody's clear on what's supposed to happen, and then they can debate on the arguments that happen after the model.
Hi Josh, I have a question about the split strategy because I read some of the chapters written by Mr. Steve Johnson on the manual, specifically page 126. And he said he never in favor of the split strategy because it makes the proposition posed by Prime Minister seems incomplete. But I have to ask, though, if the Prime Minister make all the arguments and the Deputy Prime Minister is supposed to add some positive material to this, and he thinks that split strategy may not be good, so how can the Deputy Prime Minister to read something positive?
First of all, Steve is wrong. No, I'm just kidding. I think that's probably. I think what you're getting at there, just to be perfectly clear, is a labeling thing. When I'm saying split, I'm meaning the same thing that Steve says when he says constructive argumentation. And some regions call it a split. I think what Steve is talking about is a split in terms of a break in between the two speakers, as opposed to constructive argumentation. So I think he also says that the Deputy Prime Minister should have additional constructive material, and that's what I've defined as a split. And the reason I call it that is there are certain regions around the world that label it as a split, but it really means constructive material and it means positive material. The other thing that we talked about was the idea of a hung case, and that's also what Steve is getting at. You don't want arguments to be in the Deputy Prime Minister's speech that are necessary for the Prime Minister's speech to make sense. So you don't want to give the Deputy Prime Minister arguments that should be coming out early, that should be identified in the Prime Minister's speech. When I say that there's a split, again, you're saying that there's new argumentation or there's constructive argumentation, as opposed to Steve's talking about a split. He's saying there's a split between the speakers to where they don't come together as one unified team. And so when I'm talking about you make one 14-minute speech, it's going to be cohesive, and it's going to make a lot more sense than having two disjointed speeches. And that would be the split that Steve's talking about, unless I mischaracterized him.
Can I just say a couple things?
Yeah, definitely.
First of all, thanks for reading that.
Sorry, I have another question.
Wait. Let me answer the split question first, okay? When I'm imagining a split, I'm saying that in general, I'm saying that you should avoid splits that are presented as if there's going to be substantive material in the Deputy Prime Minister's speech that's not revealed in the Prime Minister's speech. My concern is that when teams do things like the Prime Minister says, I'll talk about the political reasons and the economic reasons, and my partner is going to talk about the philosophic reasons. My concern with that is that by the time it gets to your Deputy Prime Minister's speech, the philosophic reasons might not be relevant anymore. And by previewing that information, you lock yourself into that approach. But I want to be clear that when I said that I am not in favor of a split, it doesn't mean that it never ever works. It doesn't mean that it's the wrong or illegal thing to do. It just means that my preference is that you not declare what's going to happen 14 or 21 minutes later in the debate. Because I think that as a strategy is risky and keeps you from being flexible like Josh was encouraging you to be. That was what I meant when I was talking about a split. Certainly the Deputy Prime Minister brings more constructive material to the debate, brings more content and substance to the debate. That's part of the responsibility too.
You should be clear when you write.
You should be clear when you lecture.
Okay, can I ask a question now? Hi Josh, in your speech you mentioned that we can make some comparative analysis. I suppose you mean for every speaker you can make such kind of analysis. I wonder how is that different from the final conclusion of clashes for the last speaker on each bench? Thank you.
You're talking about the summary speakers there?
Yeah, that's one.
Yeah, and definitely that's something that applies to all of the speeches. And I actually think it's probably most important in the summary speeches to show the comparison. And I'll be getting more into that. That's me and Logan. We'll be talking about the summary speeches, but I guess we can preview it. The summary speaker is supposed to summarize the debate and show why their team was better than the other teams in the debate. So a good summary speaker, once again, is going to not just label what they've talked about and label what the opposition team has talked about, but also show how those two things intertwine and why comparatively what they've talked about is better. And the Deputy Prime Minister, I think it's important for them to do that to ensure that they've started out the clash in the debate and to make sure that they haven't started out a debate where the government side is talking about one thing and the opposition side is talking about something different and the two things don't meet. And they wait for the closing teams to do that for them. So I think it's important in every position, but particularly in the Deputy Prime Minister, to allow for them to start the clash, and then particularly in the summary speeches to allow for them to correctly synthesize the debate that happened.
Josh has been waiting down here in the front.
Yeah.
Hello, hi.
Okay. Who should be the first? Okay, I will be the first. I have a question for the deputy part. Sorry. I'm quite interested about the situation you said when the deputy doesn't have something new to say, he or she could use a trick. And could you further explain and how could we use a trick and not let the judge find out?
Right. Okay. Like I said, like potions. It's completely legal. I was kidding when I said it was illegal. But the idea is in the labeling of your speech. If you talk about what the opposition side talked about, so just to clarify, she's referring to if you don't have something to say, I think, and the opposition side comes with an argument, you take that and you use it as a split. You use the converse of that as a split. Is that what you're saying? Yeah, is that right? Okay, so when the opposition side has come up with an argument, instead of, especially a broad philosophical argument, the example was, I forget what the example was. I'll look at the example while I talk. So if the opposition side comes up with an argument, you can take the reverse of that, and instead of rebutting their philosophical concept, you can add to, it's the right to life. So if the opposition side says that individuals have a right to life, instead of using that as rebuttal as a Deputy Prime Minister and saying, no, they don't have a right to life for these reasons, they don't have a right to, or they do have a right to complete control for these reasons, you can take the converse of it and label it as positive material. And you can say, what I'm going to talk about, so you've really thought of a new constructive argument. The idea that the right to life should include the right to end your life is a constructive argument, right? That's positive material. The fact that you only thought about it after the opposition side talked doesn't really matter, right? So you label it, instead of labeling it as rebuttal, you label it as your split, and as your constructive material, not your split. So you label that as positive new material, and you can use that to make sure that you have something different to talk about that still is directly related to what's going on in the debate.
Hello, I have just one question.
Excuse me, I have been waiting for long enough. Okay. Hi, as much as I understand the importance and value of teamwork, I still wonder if the first speaker has grabbed most of the important points, for the second speaker his or her role seems somehow less important than the first speaker. And does that mean that the second speaker, when individually ranking, will always be after his or her first speaker, or is it more about role fulfillment? Thank you.
I think without getting too much into speaker roles, that you can get, if your Prime Minister does a really good job, and you're the Deputy Prime Minister, and you really support everything that they said, they can look better than you, I guess. So to answer your question, as a Deputy Prime Minister, I suppose you could get worse speaker scores than your Prime Minister. I really don't think you should be worrying about that, though. I think you should be worrying about the team points, and that you guys are getting a first as a team. And as a Deputy Prime Minister, you're vital to that happening. If you do rebuild everything your Prime Minister said, you make them look better, you make them look smarter, which in turn wins you the debate as a team. So the answer, I guess, is yes. You're assisting your Prime Minister, which gives them the glory, but at the same time, you walk home with the trophy too. So I wouldn't worry too much about that.
Could I ask a question? My question is, when you talk about cut out the closing team, are you really think that we should try everything to cover all the points in the first group, so that the second group of the same part can only talk about what we have talked about in the first group?
Right. No. Could you lift your hand up so I can see where you are too? Oh, wow, right in front. Sorry. Yeah, the answer, no. You want to cut out your closing team, but you don't necessarily do that by having all of the arguments. Remember, you could also do that by having one argument that is the most important. So, for example, when we were talking about the smoking, if you flesh out the argument of the benefits of human health, protecting the health of people and society and secondhand smokers, etc., you've taken the strongest argument and you've fleshed it out. So you've cut out your closing team in the sense that you've taken the best material in the debate. And so anything that they say after you is going to pale compared to what you've talked about. And remember, you are, as we've talked about before, you are trying to beat all of the other teams in the debate. And sometimes it's hard as an opening team to beat the same team on your side that comes after you, because they get to hear what you say and they get to try and improve on it. So you want to do the best you can to make sure that you take the best material, the most pertinent material, and you argue it completely so that they can't take it. And sometimes that does mean taking, it's very rare that one argument will be enough to win an entire round. So sometimes it means taking 2 or 3. But again, it's more about explaining the depth of the argument to where you do it in a manner that they can't do it better than talking about 100 different arguments. Because like we talked about for the extension speakers, if you take 8 different arguments, you've covered them all, but they can take what they think are the best 3 and argue them better than you did, and then they'll beat you. So the answer is yes, you do want to cut out your closing team, but you want to do it by taking the best argumentation, not necessarily the most argumentation.
Thank you very much.
Hello, Josh. And just now, Professor Stephen Johnson mentioned that we should talk about what we should do, but not what we can do. So just for an example, that yesterday we talked about this government believed that we should establish India as a permanent member for UN Security Council. For this kind of topic, we know little about India, we know little about UN Security Council, and so the proposition talk a lot about, okay, India hold a very large population, so we should do that. And as in opposition, we say, you cannot do that, you have to spend a lot of money, you should ask the people from all over the world to vote for that, and we think that this feasibility is not good. So the opposition is good at talking about feasibility, and you think that we should not talk about that. So is it becoming something that the proposition always win, or even the topic is undebatable?
No, I don't think, I don't think that it's unfair to talk about feasibility. I think, and that's why we said, in the government side, they do have to come up with a model, they do have to make it reasonable, and on the opposition side, you can definitely question them on that, but the important thing is to not make that the focus. Like, you can point out that there's some issues in it, you can point out that it's not going to work, but then you want to move on to the philosophical ideas behind it. In the example you gave us, the money argument, I don't think is the strongest. The money argument is one of the feasibility types that you probably just want to drop. However, when you're talking about that people should vote on it, I don't think that's a feasibility argument. I think what you're getting at under that, instead of framing it as people should vote on it, you could talk about if you want real representation, you should give people the capacity to have their voices heard. And so instead of labeling that as a feasibility argument, if that's the argument you want to make, you can label that as a philosophical argument. You can label that as an argument that has some principled underpinnings to it. And that would make it a lot more effective and make sure that it carries throughout the debate, more so than just an argument that kind of complains about the way in which they've produced the model.
Okay, finally it's my turn. I have just one simple question about how to offer POI. When I give my speech and somebody is too eager to control himself or herself to offer his or her POI and make big noises and intervene my speech or even stop my speech. And I want to know whether you judges will control the situation in case such unfriendly or such noisy offering of POI ruin the debate.
Right, I think, and this would apply to every position, obviously, not just the opening government. I think on one hand, if you are the person giving the POIs, like, don't be a jerk about it, don't be obnoxious, and if nobody does that, then it's not an issue, for one. For two, in terms of the judges, different judges are going to do different things. I'm really lenient about that. If I'm judging, if I can hear the speaker, I don't really care what's going on. If they're making noises over here, I'm going to ignore it. And I'm going to listen to what you're saying. Other judges are fairly strict about it. They can call for order if they think that if they can't hear what's going on, or if they feel like it's bothering you, they can tell people to be quiet. If people continuously don't be quiet. The judges can take that into account with the adjudication. It very, very, very rarely comes to that. But I think that the most important answer is, as a speaker, you want to have control over the audience, and you want to have control over the room to where you don't let that bother you. The best thing is, as a speaker, you want to have the discipline to, no matter what they're saying or how much noise they're making, you're focusing on the judges, and you're continuing your speech, and you're ignoring everything that they're saying. So just the best answer is just try not to let it bother you. Especially if you know the judge is listening to what you have to say, and they're just making idiots out of themselves, let them do it.
Hello? Hi, Josh, I'm right here. Well, most of you and Steve were talking about the BP debate was all about what we should do instead of what we can do. So I was just wondering, does it mean we're not expected to bring up any solutions or the way of solving problems about the current situation? Because it is kind of different from the AP debate game, you know.
Right, definitely.
Yeah.
And again, what we say is not that you shouldn't bring that up, but that it shouldn't be the focus. It shouldn't be the focus of the debate. You know, a lot of these issues have been going on for decades, and people in government haven't come up with a solution to it. Example: if you wanted to propose a green tax being implemented, you know, the American government can't figure out how to do that. Like, hundreds of thousands of people working on it can't figure out how to do that. You're not expected as two people in a debate to come up with the solution that's going to save the world. So you have a model, but you don't. The debate shouldn't be focused on the model. And I think like the beginning of the presentation, when I'm talking about debate as a competitive activity and as an intellectual exercise, really gets to this. Like, if you're arguing about a model, nobody's learning anything. Nobody comes out of the debate having thought about any of the reasons why. Nobody comes out of the debate having examined what their opinion of this is. And you don't grow as a person. You don't learn about the issue. You don't examine the issue if you focus on the model. So I think, just again, remembering that debate shouldn't just be about trying to win and be defensive, but thinking about you're trying to propose something that's going to stimulate people's minds and get them to come out of the debate, hopefully, and it sounds really corny, but get out of the debate a better person than they went into the debate, and having a clearer worldview of their own beliefs. That happens only through examining the arguments and the philosophies and what should happen. It doesn't come from arguing over numbers.
Morning, Josh.
Josh, I think last question.
Okay, I think this is the last question.
Yes. You know, we have a 30-minute discussion before the competition. And the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister are partners, and they discuss on some same issues or main points. My question is, which is the best strategy that should we share the issues, and the Prime Minister should deliver all the issues or main points in his speeches, or should he leave some main points to the Deputy to deliver his speech?
Right, I think
which is better.
I think what Steve and I were both talking about also is there's certain arguments that need to come first because they're mandatory for the debate to make sense, and they're mandatory for the presentation of your side. Those arguments have to come in the Prime Minister's speech. So when we talk about a hung case, and then what Steve talks about when they're previewing a split, you don't want to leave arguments that are either necessary to the Deputy Prime Minister, or you don't want to really try and guess what the Deputy Prime Minister should be saying without knowing what happens in the debate. Theoretically, in prep time, you want to come up with enough arguments to fill, again, one 14-minute speech, and then prioritize those arguments in a way that makes logical sense were that one speech. So you do want your Deputy Prime Minister to have material, but you don't want material that's necessary for the debate to make sense and necessary for your case to make sense to come to the Deputy speech. You want that to come to the Prime Minister's speech.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you again, Josh, for the discussion of the opening proposition speech. We're going to take a brief break, 5-minute break, and we'll come back here, and Jess Prince will tell us about the opening opposition position. It's 9:45 now. Please be back in 5 minutes.
No, it's good.
I was going to stop and watch.
No, it's actually.
You know my favorite? feasibility response. Oh, never mind.
Josh.
I think we're not going to do the exercise this morning. Okay, because this ran so long.
Yeah, I didn't know how long it was.
Supposing I'm a closing proposition, leader of proposition, but that's a proposition, and the leader of the opening opposition has asked a lot of, has given a lot of arguments and points, and I also give the new extension. And my member cannot give the new extension because I have reports maybe as the agriculture and the environmental exercise, and my members cannot promote the environmental aspects of technology. And if I want to promote my reports technology, I cannot be limited to promote this. We promote this by the PUI way. Because I have 5 points and I only speak 3 points. 2 points my members cannot promote.
If each team spends 50% of the time on advanced proposition,
is your question whether or not you can use a point of information to develop your point? That would be very difficult because remember, a point of information less than 15 seconds. At the most 15 seconds. Generally, a point of information is 10 seconds long. So it's very difficult for you to develop a point in 10 to 15 seconds.
Obviously, that's like a feasibility issue. Yeah, it's definitely
Changes all the time in the debate, right? But at the same time, like, hey, how the benefits of my side.
So again, well, then you're remember I talked about education. But if the other option is to say this issue is more about
you can certainly offer a point of information and get an important piece of information out there and things like that. But as far as offering an entire point, you can't really do that. Like it's just really not possible to develop that point.
You do that must depend on what you saw.
I'm sorry?
But QM must depend on what the opposite side.
What the other side is currently talking about. Your point of information has to be related to what they would say. So you were standing up there and you were talking about an individual's choice and the right to choose and exert my influence across the world. It would be very strange if someone were to stand up and offer a point of information about the economics of the there's a disconnect between what you're saying and what my point of information is saying. So that wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to the judges. That was a really good question. The point of information to be effective should be related to the material that you're talking about. Now, every once in a while, notice Josh had mentioned that every once in a while, especially if you're opening government and the closing opposition is talking, sometimes it's important to say, that's fine and well, that's great it's talking about, let's say, the school policy. We've given all of the health issues in the opening government. The closing opposition has spent a lot of time talking about the impact on economics. It might be okay for you to say that's fine and well that you're talking about all of these economic issues and the impact upon the economy.